Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Ashers, and this is.
Pat O.
And also,
Lyle Blackburn.
oh my gosh, Lyle Blackburn. I told Jeremiah Byron this week that I was having you on my show, and he squeed with glee. I mean, he was so excited. He just couldn't contain himself. So, super exciting to have you on. I can't wait to get weird with you. Let's.
Right on. I love it when people squee about me, I guess.
He was very excited. He was like, Lyle's the coolest guy ever. And I was like, and then we talked about how cool you were. So
He almost dropped the cattle prod that he was using on a terrorist's balls when he in the middle of the interrogation.
Oh my gosh.
I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, so we'll talk about who Lyle is if people don't know here shortly. Anyway, I said last week, and I'm gonna say it again. Clown sightings. Clown sightings are back. They are our new Nessie sightings. There was another clown sighting this week, and over in Britain. So two teenagers were walking down the beach, and some clown was allegedly stalking them. And then one of the teenagers, his angry mother, went and decided to take it up with the internet and posted about it online. Clowns are like the new, you see those posts going around that are like, oh, there's a sex trafficker at Walmart or whatever. That's like the new, it's like what it is now. They're coming back again, and apparently coming back with a vengeance.
They're on I want to do the math, but I feel like it's like a 5-year rotation or something where the clown sightings happen. You know what I mean?
There is a pattern to it. I mean, Lauren Coleman's written about it before. A couple times, actually, has written about it. How there is a pattern to these sightings, and they kind of make a resurgence. So, I mean, are the clown sightings, what is it? Hysteria? Is it just people making shit up? I mean, nowadays with social media, it's so easy to just get online and be like, oh, I saw this thing that nobody else saw, but I saw it, But these have been going around for a very long time. They predated social media. So, I don't know. Lyle, what do you think about these clown sightings?
Actually, it's intriguing just because they're different. There's always sort of the ubiquitous Bigfoot and Dogman and stuff. So when the clown sighting comes up, it's like, wow, what is that? Actually, I investigated a rash of clown sightings right like a quarter mile from where I live in Texas. I live between Dallas and Fort Worth, and I had seen on our little neighborhood social media thing that some ladies like, that's twice we've seen this creepy clown in this kind of wooded area near this park. And in the span of 2 or 3 weeks, there were several reports of people seeing clowns. So, I actually well, it was easy. I just walked over there and staked out the area. And me and my daughter Lila, she's kind of small, but she's kind of interested in this stuff. So we were like looking for the clown, and we'd hang out till almost dark. But we never had a sighting. But I was certain that the lady wasn't making it up.
Wow. What do you think you would? I mean, how? When you talk about encountering a Bigfoot or something, it's definitely different than encountering a clown. I mean, how do you think you would have reacted had you seen a clown?
Probably a mix of just, I don't know, curiosity and wariness, because we're dealing with a person, and people
Right.
are scarier to me than anything in the woods or whatever. Maybe not more than extraterrestrial, but save
Sure.
for that, because obviously I could chase down this clown. It's going to be a person. It's somebody dressed up. But I mean, is this just some kid playing a joke, or is it like John Wayne Gacy? There's a whole
Yeah.
range of clown activity that I may, in the moment, not pursue the clown.
It's a
Sure.
person, but it's a clearly unhinged person. And as we've learned throughout history, people can be dangerous.
People absolutely can be dangerous.
You know what I mean? So,
People,
yeah.
they're often dangerous.
It's somebody that chose to dress up like a clown and then wander around in the middle of the night, and there's a lot to unpack there.
Right. And I think in probably most cases, especially today with the internet and everything, it's something that you can easily scare people and then try to watch if people post about it,
Yeah.
and get a kick out of it.
Right.
So I mean, it seems like internet, or maybe somebody trying to post on YouTube if somebody else is videoing it, that's probably some of the motivation. But but really, you can, like you say, you can never be sure. And this isn't just a phenomenon of today. I mean, Lauren Coleman has talked about this in years past, and there was all
Mhm.
those. I think there's a rash of sightings near Chicago and all that years
Oh, yeah.
ago. So scary.
Yeah, we the report we had about it last week was about a lady who had called to report that a clown had broken into her home and didn't talk to her but held up a sign saying that he was there to rob her. She just needed to cooperate, and he didn't actually take anything. He just left. So if it is a prank, it seems like that prank is definitely ramping up to dangerous levels. And I mean, Britain's a little bit different. It seems that most of the sightings recently have been happening over there. I think in the U.S. it's a bit more difficult because, like, well, people will shoot you. I mean, that's that. Not that we haven't had our own, our own clown sightings here. We have, but I think it's just more popular over there. Because it's a little easier prank to pull off, and it's relatively harmless as long as you're not hurting anybody. So, I think that's a good one. But yeah, more clown sightings. We'll continue to report them as they come. No Nessie sightings for a while, but lots of clowns. So there's that. There's also a woman who claims to have filmed a Tasmanian tiger in Australia in an Australian park recently. And, it it's hard to say what it is because, of course, you get the classic grainy footage from very far away. It's hard to make out the details on it, but a lot of people are saying that it's just a mangy fox, which mangy foxes exist. They are out there. I don't know. I want to believe that that's what this is that she caught on film. The last time we had a Tasmanian tiger caught came from a TikToker, and it was in the middle of the neighborhood, and it was relatively small, but I mean, that's what it looked like. With this one, it is out in the wild somewhere, and it's just, I mean, it could be literally anything. Pat, have you seen this footage?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I probably should have sent it to you.
Oh well.
Sorry. Lyle, have you seen this video?
I have not, but
Okay.
I've seen those sort of various ones that come up, thylacine videos every once in a while, and of course, the sort of the tragic circumstances of what happened to that animal. We all want it to still exist, and we're very hopeful that that these sightings are actually legitimate, and that is Tasmanian tiger. But
Right.
it's just the usual problem of it. Seems like anytime there's a mysterious creature on camera, it's too grainy and blurry to tell.
Yeah. Right, and I agree with that. It's just inconclusive. There's not enough to go off of with it. It's like I said, too far away, too grainy. Again, the romantic in me wants to believe that that's what it is. But I'm not gonna. I wasn't there. I'm in Ohio, not Australia, so I don't know. I wish I knew. But it is one of those creatures that I think that I feel like there is some good evidence that there could be a population out there, and so yeah, I want to believe that that's what she caught. And that's that. And then I also have been in correspondence with a woman. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but somebody had sent me of course, somebody's Facebook post where this woman locally to Ohio had said that a hiker just a couple days ago, allegedly, found a Bigfoot body in Salt Fork State Park. And that the body has been now acquired and taken somewhere else, but it's weird because she seems to be the only person reporting on it. So I don't have much hope that anything's really going to come out of that. I mean, surely if we did find a Sasquatch corpse out here, the grass man, more people would know about it besides this lone woman. But I have seen it. People have sent it to me, and I have reached out to her, and we are trying to talk to her and figure out where this report came from. She's trying to tell me it came from a news article, but it's odd because she won't send me the link. And I don't know if it's just because she's older and doesn't know how it works, or if it's because it doesn't exist, so.
Have you seen that story that's making the rounds about like a TAC team that went into the woods in Ohio to kill a family of Bigfoots?
No.
Big feets?
Bigfoots or big feets?
Yeah, no. It's someone posted on Instagram. I've seen it in a couple places, but supposedly there was it was like a military unit that was dispatched to go in, and they killed a bunch of these things. Maybe that's what the lady's talking about. I don't know.
It could
Um,
be.
yeah, I want to say who's the Mothman 46 guy.
Oh yeah, Roger.
Yeah, I want to say he posted that on his Instagram.
Huh.
Yeah, and it. So I wonder if that's what the story is. Yeah, U.S. Army sent commandos to murder Bigfoot family for tests, and it was in Ohio.
That's weird. I
And
don't
it's
personally subscribe to that idea, but I don't
and they
know.
took them back to Right Pat.
Yeah,
So I,
yeah. They want to figure out their cloaking and how it works. You know, I don't know. Lyle, any thoughts on the Bigfoot body?
Well, I did see that, post about the woman finding it. Of course, Salt Fork State Park is a place where there's a long history of Bigfoot
Oh yeah.
sightings, and I've been there several times in conjunction with the conference there. And it's a great area, and I guess if any place is likely to come up with a body, that would be one of them. But it's the usual thing with anytime there's a body, it's sort of just vague secondhand information, or then it's been confiscated, or there's always this same chain of events that keeps us from verifying it or actually seeing it or anything like that. So I see that stuff, I just kind of stand back, and if it's something that's legit, eventually there would be real news about it.
Right. I feel like I personally, I feel like I have some type of responsibility because I live here, but and if anybody should be out there, probably I should be one of those people that's right there.
oh geez, by that rationale, I should be all over the O'Hare Airport Mothman shit. And I'm not going anywhere near
You should, but that's your fault. Right. That's your problem.
that.
I mean, I would if I could, but I'm not there. No.
Right.
So I feel like I need to do my due diligence and just make sure that I question the person. Who knows? Maybe she's onto something.
Talk to the guy at the laundromat that works at Right Pat that you get all your info from.
I don't talk to a guy who's on that.
Or whoever your insider is.
Got a couple of them.
Yeah, I know.
Dude, they're not going to know anything. Well, I mean, if it involves the military, allegedly, but they don't. I mean, what they tell me is that they have absolutely no interest in cryptids at all, and it's silly, and I believe that. And I, again, I just don't. I feel like the military would be more interested in finding these things. Not the military, but the government would be more interested in finding these things because they load a lot of the funding up in like these things that they use for conservation efforts and things like that. Not that the money doesn't go there at all, but when you look at a bill and when a bill's passed, there's a lot more to it than just like what the point was. And so I feel like it would benefit them more to prove that something like Bigfoot existed, because they could be like, oh, well, we need to add funding to protect these things, and then they could use that to then pad other projects. But that's just me. I don't know. And as far as this lady goes, again, I'm trying to talk to her. It's just kind of difficult to talk to. I don't have much hope for it, but hey, let's see what happens. Maybe there's a Bigfoot body that somebody is in possession of right now. I don't know.
Yeah,
And if you're listening to the show,
you never know.
I'm sorry,
If you're local, then I guess definitely follow up, because it's like the clown sighting. I was like, hey, how can I pass it? I don't normally investigate clown sightings, but it's something that you can look into. So yeah, definitely. And if if it comes to be true, then obviously you will be celebrated for your investigative skills.
A piece of that, exactly. I want a piece of that pie. Bite off a piece of that for myself. No, I mean, yeah, of course, if it's local and I can get to it, I'll entertain it. I operate on a 1% possibility. There's a 1% chance. I'm there. I'm trying, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. That's really all I had to report this week. Pato, did you have any news?
No.
Don't you guys have a new show out this week on your Y2K movies?
Oh yeah, the episode we recorded a bunch of new stuff. Prey, the Predator sequel is dropping. Will be released by the time this episode comes out, and then the next batch we just did Glorious, which was a Shudder original that was pretty good. Shaun of the Dead. We're gonna do like an Edgar Wright thing for the next couple months, where we do one Edgar Wright movie a month, And then we also did the Empty Man, which was a movie that I was not familiar with. That was actually really awesome. And then forget what the other one was. I don't know. Be surprised. Listen to the show, you'll be surprised. And that was that. It kind of ties into my weekend. Like, what did I do this weekend? I watched movies. We did that podcast. Uh, I'm starting up my monthly Dungeons and Dragons game up at Rock Island Public House with a friend of the show, Mike Vanderbilt, and we're doing Spelljammer, which is like D&D in space. It's kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy with pirates and shit. That starts next weekend, so just been writing for that, you know.
Being a regular guy.
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff coming up, so I'm just kind of the calm before the storm.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that is the news this week. Lyle, why don't you tell everybody who doesn't know who you are?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm Lyle Blackburn. I'm a author and musician and cryptid researcher from Texas. And I've written such books as The Beast of Boggy Creek and Sinister Swamps. Um, and I've been interested in the subject of cryptids all my life. And as an adult, I spent most of my adult life as a musician, but also did writing on the side for various magazines. And therein, eventually wrote a book about my favorite subject, the Legend of Boggy Creek Bigfoot case of the 1970s, in which a movie was made. And once that book came out, that sort of launched me into more of a serious pursuit of researching these cases and writing about them. And I've published, let's see, 7 books to date and been a part of a lot of small town monsters documentaries as the narrator and sometimes in those films. And a lot of research over the years in various states, researching various cryptids.
So, did you? Okay. Why the Beast of Boggy Creek? I mean, I know that you talk a lot, and you said it, even just a couple minutes ago in this episode. I know you talk a lot about doing things locally, and you mentioned that you live in Texas. What caught your eye about that creature in particular?
Well, it was one that when I was a little kid. I mean, I was from as far back as I can remember. I loved horror movies and monsters, Frankenstein, whatever. And probably around third grade, I got a book that featured stories about Bigfoot, Yeti, Loch Ness Monster. And that was the first time I realized, wow, there's things out there that are monstrous people that may exist, people see in real life. So I really thought that was cool. And uh, I was not aware at the time that there were Bigfoot sightings anywhere but the Pacific Northwest. And that seemed like a long way away.
Sure.
I grew up hunting with my father, and we bow hunted in various parts of Texas. We spent a lot of time camping. We camped in Arkansas, and one time when I was young, my parents took me to the drive-in, and there was a movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek, which originally was released in 1972, but played for many years in the theater and drive-in circuit. And the movie dramatized sightings of a kind of dangerous and aggressive Sasquatch creature in southern Arkansas near the small town of Fouke. And that really did it for me because it was like a monster movie meets cryptid, and it was in Fouke, which is about a little over 3 hours from where I live in Texas. So, that kind of just captured my imagination and inspired me to research more about those sort of things and realize that they're not as far away as I had thought. And then, like I said, I'd spent years kind of writing and doing some professional writing and eventually wanted to write a book. And I thought, man, I'd love to research, the Legend of Boggy Creek story, how the movie was made, the history of the actual sightings of the creature that the movie was based on. And I thought it's great because it's only 3 hours away. I can actually, go there and
Sure.
interview people and look at the area. And I was really quite surprised that a book hadn't been written on it because I thus discovered that half the people at any Bigfoot conference just love that movie. So, the popularity still and the influence of the Legend of Boggy Creek on today's Bigfoot research is just huge. And so I kind of picked the best a really good subject to enter this field with, and that's ever since been kind of my home ground. I continue to log sightings and interview anybody who has sightings there, and go there frequently just because I like the area.
Sure. Do you feel like it has become not well, the subject itself is pretty relevant. A lot of people are familiar with the Falk monster. We talked about it. We did an episode for the Patreon about Arkansas, and of course we talked about it. But do you feel like, as far as sightings and experiences, do you feel like those have dwindled and they're not really relevant anymore? Or are you still getting a lot of reports about this creature?
Well, I think they're certainly relevant, and I wouldn't say I get a lot of reports, but I do get reports on a fairly consistent basis, and a number of them each year that I look into or interview the person in person, and find that there's still some very credible sightings. And this is, if you look at it as a Bigfoot case on the whole, I mean, there's also sightings if you span out from that little area of southwest Arkansas. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
miles from Louisiana. It's miles from only a few miles from Texas, and all of that area is full of Bigfoot sightings all the time. So it's not just relevant to Falk, but just that whole southern Bigfoot type thing. And so I've, of course, having written The Beast of Boggy Creek, then I kind of felt it was my duty to kind of keep up and keep up with the continuing story of this. And, I've published additional books and information and have a website about it, because a lot of times I see somebody commenting, "Oh yeah, I saw that movie. Has there been any more sightings?" They're unaware
Hmm.
that there's been hundreds of continuing sightings. So I feel like that's relevant just in terms of Bigfoot research, if not kind of keeping the story alive, because it is still alive.
Sure. Yeah, and I can relate to that. I understand. Um, you know, let's talk about the three toes on this thing. What's the deal with the three toes on this creature? You think? I mean, are is there a possible hominid walking around that's just three toed, or some people, wonder if it's theorize if it was an injury and maybe it was just that one, or if these things have evolved or genetic mutations, or what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, that certainly is kind of problematic because, any, uh, humanoid, hominoid, has primates have five toes, and that's
Right.
only natural. I mean, if something, especially it walks upright, a 7 foot stature that weighs, 300 to 500 pounds, you need all five toes for balance. Three toes kind of doesn't make sense. So that's always been a problem. But most people don't realize that the tracks found there and featured in the trackway featured in the movie is a three-toed trackway, but there's been other tracks found that have four and five toes. So it's not just consistently a three-toed, track that any tracks that have been found. Um, I personally kind of feel like that it's possible that there was some hoaxing involved to try to add to the story or something, and maybe that's where the three-toed thing
Sure.
came from. Or again, there's a whole host of possibilities, like you mentioned, genetic deformities, uh, mutations, injuries,
Hmm.
something like that to explain why this individual has three toes, but it doesn't seem like biologically it doesn't make sense for the locomotion. So, again, sort of goes back to always that without a body or a specimen, it's really hard to tell. We can only conjecture that. Um,
Yeah, definitely. What I find interesting about the three toes is that Momo, right there on a border state, Mississippi, also has three toes sometimes. And so if it were to be a genetic mutation of some sort, then that would kind of track, right? You kind of got this area where these things are obviously breeding to continue, and then some of them are ending up with this deformity.
Certainly, and I mean, I investigated the Momo case because I wrote a book on it. So,
Hmm.
I did notice those similarities, and the time frame in which Momo was going on was at the literally the same time period as the Falcon Monster in the early '70s, and yeah, they correspond a lot with the sort of hairy, scary creature, and then this whole three-toed thing. So um, that again kind of supports that maybe there is a population of these creatures that does have three toes, or that there's obviously going to be a small population that perhaps inbreeding has caused this deformity that's sort of carried on. So that's a definite possibility.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's kind of silly because it's like the three toes, you see that as somebody that's scientifically minded and you go, oh, bullshit, this thing doesn't have three toes. But then you see those three toes correlate to each other in different areas, but very, similar enough to where, again, a population could be. And that's the way I think about it anyway. Pat, do you got any comments on three toes or the Boggy Creek incident or?
No, I'm letting you guys do your thing until we can start talking about his music.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
As you were.
Well, I mean, hey, that's a good segue into it. So your music, when you Google Lyle Blackburn, obviously I feel like, because we have this one community, that's how a lot of people listen to the show. They're going to know you for that. But a lot of people have mentioned, like to me specifically, they started finding out who you were through your music. So, your music, as far as being, I'm not going to say published, but it seems like you have a more media footprint with the music. So obviously you've been doing that for a long time. Um, what got you into that? Just common interest, and you decided to kind of run with it. And
What was the first song you learned to play on guitar?
ooh, there you go.
I know what I'm doing here. This is my.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Pat.
I started playing music when I was in junior high. If you don't count sort of the piano lessons, which I didn't want, I wanted guitar, drums, or something. But I started playing in a band in seventh grade, playing drums, and eventually learned bass and guitar. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I'd already been on actual, well, back then there was vinyl. It wasn't CDs or anything else. So I was on a vinyl record with a punk band I was in. I played in a lot of early hardcore punk bands. And I think when I first got a guitar, I remember trying to play Crazy Train because the guitarist, I played drums at the time, but I got a guitar, and then the guitarist for our band was, I don't know, playing Crazy Train. I was like, show me that, and I think that was the first thing I tried to actually play. And so, my pursuit in life was to be a professional musician, and I was early 20s. I was signed with a band called Solitude Eternus. We were signed to Roadrunner Records, and we toured, did a lot of touring all over Europe and Canada and the US. And I spent a lot of time doing all that. And then I formed my band I still have called Ghoultown. I formed that in 1998 and did that on my own record label, which became fortuitous because the indie thing got big, and so then I owned all the material, and that's how I've made a living, is the music, and that's probably why I have a big footprint in that, is because I don't really, the book writing and all that is good and everything, but it doesn't make a living. It's the music.
I saw that you were a bass player, and I played bass too. I still play bass, but I wonder, were you the type of bass player that legitimately wanted to play bass, or were you a bass player because you knew too many guitar players?
No, I actually wanted to play bass because, I'd been a drummer, and that just became because my parents would not buy me a guitar or a bass. And so I tricked them by saying, well, I can go out for marching band. And I got on drums. And my grandmother brought me a drum set, which they didn't like. But then that led me to join a punk band.
Mm.
So it was successful to get me in a band, but I really wanted to be more forward and up front on the stage. And I like bass. And so I actually joined that first band, Solitude Eternus, as the drummer, and then the bass player quit, and I said I want that position. Find another drummer. So then I moved to bass. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I played with my fingers and stuff. I wasn't just trying, picking like a guitar. I mean, I tried to learn the art of bass.
I hate bass players that use their fingers. That whole scene. When so yeah, I mean you've toured with a lot of these acts. What's your favorite place to play in Chicago?
Chicago. We played at the Vic Theater once,
Oh, okay.
twice.
Yeah.
It was a huge, really cool place. I remember that. Um, yeah, that's been my favorite place I've ever played in Chicago, and played at other smaller places. I remember one that was downstairs. I remember it sucked because we had to load all our equipment down these narrow stairways. I can't remember the name of the club. Yeah, I was like, dude, I don't want to. I don't like clubs with stairs, but yeah, I do remember the Vic Theater was super cool.
Subterranean is a famous place. Well, not famous place, but it's one of the like smaller to mid-sized places here. But it's upstairs, which sucks when you're loading in because you got to carry all your stuff upstairs. But it's straight up dangerous when you're trying to load all your shit out at the end of the night
Yeah,
because you got to go down those stairs, and it's really easy to take a header.
especially when you're drunk.
Right, exactly.
A bottle of tequila on stage, like the loadout should not be dangerous.
Do you have any harrowing tour stories or that's always my like now that we do like these paranormal events with the podcast, like we did one, the last one I did was Withville and the Withville UFO Fest, which is 10 hours from Chicago. And for me to jump in a car and go that drive that much, I think part of the reason I love it so much is because I was used to doing that with my band in my 20s. It's just getting in the car with your friends and going somewhere and rolling up and not knowing anyone and doing a show and meeting people and that whole thing and partying in the parking lot afterwards. And doing these like paranormal conventions is kind of like me getting to do that all over again. Um, I'm sure you guys spent extensive time on the road between the acts that you were in. Do you have any stories or good memories or
Oh
anything
yeah, I
from
mean
there?
there's just numerous. I could write a whole book. I mean, I remember a driver drove into the side of a hotel once in Long Island, and a, basically the fascia board, a 2x4, speared the whole entire. Um, we were in an RV. The equipment was in a like a semi or whatever, but the band itself traveled in an RV and basically skewered the RV right on the side of a hotel because he didn't realize that I don't know, he underestimated the height or whatever. So nearly just shish kebabbed our singer. And let's see, I was almost stabbed by a witch in France one time while we were trapped in Paris because the authorities claimed that our Austrian bus driver did not have the proper licenses to drive this tour bus, which was a huge tour bus company. So they put a boot thing on the bus, and we were trapped. And then at the gig, some girl that had written us some letters came out, and then I guess she got drunk, and then she was covered in blood, and she was trying to get me, and so I had to run
Trying to get you
like
what,
yeah, I was said turned because I kind of just blew her off because she was weird, and I guess she was mad about it. So, and you want to talk about a bad load in, the streets there in downtown Paris were so narrow that the bus couldn't even get down to the club. So we had to roll the equipment like 2 or 3 blocks down the sidewalks. And so I flee there and somehow hook up with this other girl who let me stay at her apartment. So I escaped the bloody witch. And then the next morning I come back, and that's when I find the boot on the van, and the guys are like, "Where have you been? We've been trapped here, in this smog infested street." I'm like, "I don't know. I was just at this French girl's apartment." But I did almost get stabbed.
By a witch at that. Wow, that's
Yeah.
I feel like if you were going to come on and tell any story, that was the one. No, I don't know.
So
I,
yeah.
I would think like yeah, like traveling around to different locations and meeting all these different people and driving in the middle of the night. Like, was there anything from all those years spent on the road that kind of fueled your interest in the paranormal? Was there any kind of crossover? I mean, especially with Ghoul. I mean, Ghoul Town obviously is a horror themed band, so you're going to attract those kind of crowds and have that kind of vibe. But like, was there anything else that kind of helped your love of the paranormal grow?
Uh, Somewhat the traveling, would, and sometimes I would know that we were near a place where something happened, or especially in Europe, we would be on those buses and we would sleep and they would drive overnight. I'd get up and I'd go, "Hey, what country are we in?" And he'd say, "Oh,
Yeah,
we're in Switzerland or whatever." But we would pass by these very old world forests and stuff where I just looked at them. I'm like, dude, there's got to be werewolves in there, and just it just looked like something out of a werewolf movie, and that always kind of just traveling around, just and the exposure to people and talking and
Mm,
stories and
yeah,
stuff, not just about you know rock and roll, but just other stuff, and you'd always get weird things or weird conversations. So all of that kind of helped form my, just general investigative and inspiration to look into these things. And um, while the bands themselves never crossed over, like I don't write songs about Bigfoot. People suggest that, but it doesn't fit. But I would just
right.
sit in the tour bus and read a lot. It gave me all those hours. I'd be sitting there reading like Bigfoot books, and the guys are like, "What are you reading?" um, and so I had all that time to read, which was kind of my basis, sort of my, I guess, the paranormal education part of it before I started then writing my own books.
right. Yeah, I mean that's gotta the two dovetailing each other nicely. Yeah, I would think the band would be kind of a magnet for people with stories and weirdos, and it keeps that culture going.
Right. And that's where the black hat came from. People always ask me about the hat or, whatever. It's like, well, the hat came from Ghoultown and it was, I bought that in Mexico far before I was wearing it on TV shows or at conferences or whatever. So
Hmm.
it in some ways kind of formed a unique image for me that has had some benefit. I guess I stand out, and even though a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but some people will have say the hat sucks or whatever they say, but it's like, dude, that's just me.
No,
So,
I gotta say, out of all the people in the paranormal community that have iconic hats, yours is probably it fits the most. I think. I
yeah,
don't.
I was going
Yeah,
to ask, are you pissed that people have stolen the hat and have
you
now
do the hat
taken
the
it on?
best, though. I don't think
I agree.
that's.
You're the
Yeah.
original hatter, I feel like. But now it's a thing. Now it's a thing. So are you like, "Hey, that's my hat idea?" Or are you just like, "Cool, people, mimicry is a great form of flattery."
Yeah, no, I never. I It's totally cool. I never think like that. Like, oh, I did this, or
Sure.
no contest. I'm like, I'm known for that, and I know that people identify. I mean, if I sometimes I'd early on I'd wear just like a baseball hat with Bigfoot on or something, and people go, "Where's your hat?" So then I just thought, I'm just going to wear it every time. It's just so associated. And I mean, my my cryptid brother Ken Gerhardt from Texas, he
Yeah.
wears the black hat, and there's always this sort of fun little thing: who had the hat first, and all this stuff. And he was also a singer in a band, and we can we have pictures of ourselves back as far as like 3 years old wearing cowboy hats, so no one can decide. We just thought we were born with them, and it's fun, and so I don't care what people wear or if they imitate it, totally cool.
Yeah. One of you did the I think it was Ken that did it. One of you did the 10-year challenge on social media and shared a picture of you and Ken. And that was like
Yeah,
the joke, you know? So you
yeah,
guys play it really well.
yeah, that was Kid. I thought that was hilarious, and that's the cool thing because he was, he was a cryptozoologist, I guess, before I was. So he could have been sort of like, "Hey, who's this guy?" But he and I don't have egos like that, and we
Yeah.
immediately thought this was cool. We're like brothers, and then we realized that even if people can't tell us apart, it was great because we're basically in two places at all times because they go, "Hey, man, I see you on TV. I love the hat." You're not really sure which one they're talking about, but it's cool because they remember.
That's hilarious. You guys like live you're like neighbors or something, right? I mean, you live really close to each other.
Well, we do both live in Texas, but and somewhat neighbors, but he's 5 hours away south
Oh,
of
wow.
San Antonio. So but that's still neighborly in Texas because,
Sure.
you can drive what 10, 12 hours across the state. But yeah, we're kind of a distance.
I can so I mean, yeah, I we can definitely see where people might get the two people. That is hilarious. Do people have you had like an instance where somebody's come up to you and started talking about a production that you've been in, but you knew it was Ken and not you?
Yeah, a few times people will say, "Oh man, I loved you on that one episode of Monster Quest." Now Ken was on Monster Quest. I was on Monsters and Mysteries in America or something, and vice versa. They'll say, "Oh, you were on that Monsters and Mysteries in America." We just learned to say, "Yeah, cool, man, thanks." Because
Yeah.
that their intentions are right in it. They're just talking about the episode, and you know, the funniest one was Ken was at the San Diego Comic Con several years ago when he was doing that show Missing in Alaska, and someone came up to him and said, "Dude, that's amazing. Are you doing cosplay of Lyle Blackburn from Ghoul Town?" And Ken was like, "What?" But then he just laughed it off, and immediately messaged me. Somebody asked me if I was cosplaying you. So we just get a huge kick out of all this.
I love that. No, that's you have a cryptozoological doppelganger. I,
Right. I mean,
I think it's great. That's
so a lot of
that's
fun.
awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, going back to now you're like the Boggy Creek person, right? That's kind of the thing. Do you are you sad about that at all? Is there anything else that you wish that people would recognize that you've done that you feel like doesn't really I mean let's be honest, people know a lot of what you do, but is there any like one thing that you wish that had more focus or people would like I said recognize that you put more work into?
Uh, well, sometimes just in general that comes up, and um, I guess people don't realize I've been part of the Small Town Monsters movies or narrated 8 movies. They'll just talk about, yeah, you were in, that was cool. You narrated Beast of or the Boggy Creek Monster or whatever. I'm like, yeah,
Hmm.
but also 7 other ones, and we did the Mothman, and we did, they kind of tend to focus on one instead of, I feel like, all of it. Or um, when people will suggest that man, you really need to write a book on the Lizard Man, or you need to write a
Sure.
book on Honey Island. I'm like, dude, I have, stuff like that where it's like they don't, they're suggesting what you should do without knowing your body of work.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think if you're a fan of someone, you kind of need to, be familiar with their body of work before you start suggesting. You don't want to go up to Glenn Danzig and say, well, you ought to do this album of just instrumental kind of moody stuff. It's like, and he's like going to hit you and then say, I did. It's called Black Aria.
Black Aria 1 and 2.
That sort of a thing. It's like, um, I'm flattered that people want me to write about stuff, but it's those times when you're like, well, worked really hard to write the book
Yeah.
on the Lizard Man. and you're suggesting I should write about it. Well, you know, I did, and it took me a long time, and I had a lot of expense to do it. But it's just minor. There's really nothing where, I feel like I haven't gotten, you know, the praise or somebody has shorted me on anything. I mean, it's totally all great. I mean, so no big deal.
Sure. Yeah, well, I can relate to that. We get that a lot for the podcast. Oh, you guys should talk about this. Well, and thankfully, most of it's just on social media, so then I can be like, "Oh, we did. Here's the episode. Everybody, go listen to it again." I
Right.
just turn it around and make it a marketing move. And so,
Yeah.
but it for a second, you're like, "Really? So you haven't listened to all 124 episodes? How dare you?" So I understand that. How long does it take you to write one of these books?
Mm, well, it could, if I just focused on a book and that's all I did every day, probably 6 months. But, some of these have been years in the making. I mean, my
Mhm.
Sinister Swamps book, I had been collecting stories of cryptids and unexplained phenomenon just in swampy areas for years. I mean, 10 years just sort of putting stuff into a file, okay, yeah, that would falls under this or whatever.
Mhm.
So it's hard to really quantify exactly how long it takes, but yeah, and these are the way I write these. I mean, they're very well annotated. The sources are very well defined. They're
Mhm.
as accurate as I can possibly be. I interview as many first person people as possible and dig up old newspapers and try to get the facts as close to correct as I can because the internet is full of errors.
Yeah.
If you just Wikipedia something and try to write a book, you're not going to be very accurate because it's errors compounding errors, and
Sure.
and it all traces back to Lauren Coleman anyway. So,
Sure.
but so it's a very methodical and time consuming thing to write a book, and yeah, it could take 6 months or a year just working on it.
Do you often have multiple books at once that you're working on?
No, I never really am writing multiple books, but
Mhm.
I will file away things like I may get a sighting report that either I will follow up on when I get the chance, or I'll follow up on it and then just sort of file it over there, going, one of these days I'm going to write a book on that area
Sure.
or that creature or whatever, and I'll go ahead and field those things as I go. Um, but it's typically once I start, okay, I'm going to write this book, then it's just double barrel straight on that, and I just concentrate, you know, solely on just writing that one book.
Yeah. Well, you seem to be uh very similar to myself, where you've taken your interests, right? Your general interest in your hobbies, and you've turned them into a career, which I think everybody should do. But do you have anything that's just yours, that you don't intend on making? Because again, I get it, but when your hobbies are your job, it can still become really stressful. So do you take the time out? Do you make sure you take the time out to have something that's just for you?
Uh, yeah, it is very hard because everything it's all one thing, and people are like, well,
Right.
don't work too much. I'm like, well, I love doing this and or music, and it's never work. I mean, I work all the
Right.
time. But the one thing that I do that's not, you know, for work is I like building monster models, like old school assembly kits, like Aurora models, and there's a lot of resin kits of various from monster movies and stuff, and I paint those and I'll build those, and that's the one thing I do that's sort of a hobby that I don't. Some people know about if they've seen my monster collection, and some people don't. But
Sure.
yeah, that's the one thing where it's like an actual hobby that's not a job.
That's for you. Have you ever thought about getting into the horror industry?
Uh, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, and I love that stuff. I do a lot of
Hmm.
horror conventions, either as Lyle
Yeah,
Blackburn at Cool Town, and you know, I wrote for Rue Morgue Horror Magazine for a decade,
yeah.
and I'm very much into horror and horror movies, and I have a big horror collection of Universal monsters and such. Um, but I try to cross over to that audience just in the cryptid thing, and I did that in Rue Morgue. That was my thing. I know cryptids, but I also know movies that feature cryptids and horror
Hmm.
movies that are sort of creature feature. Um, but I just sort of, I don't know. I got so much going on that the horror is the horror, and I just focus mostly on cryptid stuff and music.
What's your favorite horror movie the past 10 years?
Uh,
We can
That's
do
a hard one.
we can do 20.
Past
I'll give
20
you 20.
years. They're just so, I don't know. Now, I have a problem with this. I can answer the classics and stuff, but when it comes to anything in the last, especially 15 years, there is so much stuff.
Yeah.
There's, I got Shutter and I watch movies all the time, but
Hmm.
sometimes I can't even remember the names, which sounds terrible, but there's just so much of it, and there's so much on there, and there are good ones like uh, The Shed and um, Spring, and I'm trying to just review it in my mind.
Sure.
Yeah, those Spring guys got a new movie coming out. I like them. They had I forget what they did before that.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's two guys.
yeah.
Spring was a good one.
There's
What's the
cool
last?
stuff.
Well, what's the last movie that you saw that you were like, "Wow, this is really good," that you can think of?
Uh, Prey. I watched
Yeah,
that.
that was good. That was really good.
Yeah,
I'm better at that part. I'm like, I don't remember, but oh yeah, the last one I watched was this. So I can relate better to that question personally. So
right. Yeah, I can usually think of the last one I've seen. And I've taken some time off. It comes in waves because I've been working on a Texas Bigfoot book since
mhm,
like February, and then I also have been moving, and I literally haven't had any time to just sit down and watch movies. All that existed
right,
4 or 5 months ago, and everything's just been literally Texas Bigfoot or trying to sell houses and pack my stuff at night, and yeah, it's just been a whirlwind of craziness this year. So
sure,
unfortunately, things like watching a horror movie in my downtime is few and far between.
sure,
Yeah, I had to switch gears. I used to read a lot, where I would go through a book like every 2 weeks or so. And when we started this horror movie podcast, I had to just stop reading, which is like terrible. That you're like, all right, I can either read or watch TV, but that's literally the way my life is structured. There's so many hours in the day, you know what I mean? And if I'm doing one, I there's just not time to do both.
yeah,
You know,
Right,
it's
which
bullshit.
don't even get me started on video games. That's like
Oh
I
yeah,
people that play video games regularly and are way into that stuff. I'm like, what? I almost want to like look at their schedule. Like, how do you make this work? Do you not sleep? Do you ignore your children or whatever? Like, I don't know.
that's terrible. Well, you just make time for the things that you're interested in.
You're smart enough not to have kids in the first place. It's like if
Yeah,
someone had told me 12 years ago, listen, you can either have a son or you can have a PlayStation 5 that you actually use at some point in your life. You're not going to get both. What's it going to be? Who knows?
don't say that.
I'm just saying. You could be a present father, or you can have diverse interests. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to find. I get it. All I do is work all the time. I understand. Um, but that
right.
Lyle,
said, oh, go
Lyle,
ahead.
do you still hunt at all?
No, I just don't have time to hunt. We, I'd say the last time I actually went hunting was probably maybe 9 or 10 years ago. We did some hog. We were doing some hog hunting, um, but it kind of just transitioned more to just I love the outdoors and exploring and hiking, and it wasn't so much about being there to pursue animals.
Yeah.
I never was a huge. I mean, I wasn't out hunting big game or anything. It was like if I shot it, I ate it, and it was mostly like turkey hunting and a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah. My I'm trying to get into waterfowl hunting this season because I need hobbies that I find relaxing, and for some reason, shooting guns is one of them for
Oh
me.
Jesus.
No, serious. That's not like a joke. That's like there's only so many things I can do to unwind, and shooting is one of them. So yeah, I just got a shotgun a couple weeks ago, and I'm looking to get into waterfowl hunting. So that's why I asked. When you were hunting the pigs, was that like with rifles or was that bow and arrow still?
No, we were using guns on that.
Yeah, that's cool because those things are fucking dangerous. Like, it's not like you're hunting a bear, where it's. I mean, there's an element of danger there that you're not getting when you're going after ducks or deer or something. You know what I mean? The
Yeah, the hogs and the population of these hogs down here is just crazy, and you know they can be big and dangerous, and I'd say 12 years ago, say in the Sulphur River bottoms around Boggy Creek and stuff, I I didn't see very much evidence of hogs. There was no hog wallows and no rutting and all this stuff
Mhm.
digging up the ground. If you When I go there now, it's just all dug up. I mean, it's just like there are so many hogs. I've nearly stepped on some that are just laid up sleeping in the high grass.
Wow.
Um, you know, and so I carry a sidearm for that purpose. And the alligators, I almost stepped on an alligator once,
Ooh.
um, but yeah, they're dangerous. So yeah, as another element, and they're plentiful, and they need to be eradicated. They really need to be eradicated as much as
right.
possible because they're so bad for the environment. But yeah, you couldn't even put a dent in them if you're just going out, even just shooting them.
I my wife's dad was a farmer, and I went with him once to like the Indiana wow, I don't know, whatever the agriculture building where he had to drop some off some paperwork, and he was in there doing whatever he had to do, and I was kind of milling around the waiting room, and they had all this literature about like report Indiana wild pigs, and of course I took it to show my wife like, got to watch out for those Indiana pigs.
Oh
They're
God.
all over the place. But yeah, it's exactly they're actually a detriment to like agriculture and the environment, you know. Um, and they encourage people, please go out and fucking kill these things, you know. And
Wow.
I don't know if I'll get to that point because that's, I mean, that's where that's kind of, I don't want to bring up AR-15s, but like that's what people
Yeah,
use for those usually. That's like what those guns are kind of there for, is because it's something, because those things will run at you, and you know some of them have tusks and they can bite you and shit. Like they're actually kind of dangerous and
Really
fast.
dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're mean.
right.
They'll kill you. At least with a bear, like it's cute before it kills you. You just got these ugly hogs.
Yeah, and they stink. I mean, God, and that's the other thing. If you shoot one, they stink. It's like I'm more about the bird hunting. And like I said, I did a lot of turkey hunting before. I just kind of was like, I'm just going to enjoy the outdoors. But yeah,
Yeah.
with bird hunting, you're going to eat it, and it's easy to pick up and clean and all that. You're not getting a smelly hog, and yeah, it's more
That's what I'm.
enjoyable.
Yeah, that's why I want to do the bird thing, is because like it's chill. They're hard to miss because you're using bird shot. So it's like, I mean, I'm a decent shot anyway, but I can't imagine fucking that up, you know? And you're not in any danger, and you could bring your dog with you. And it just seems like way more like, you know, that's the kind of the vibe that I want to go for with this. Like, I could take up golf, but that's not really my scene. You know what I mean?
I can't.
Like,
I can't imagine you playing golf.
Yeah, it's not. And I'd have to, the amount that I would have to spend to get, because I'm 6'4", so like for me to get golf clubs that would fit like my, I would need like specialty made clubs. I realized that when I tried to take up golf in my 20s, and for the amount that I would pay for specialized clubs, I just get a Remington 870. Like fuck it, you know what I
And all
mean?
those long khaki pants too. I mean, now you're talking
I
money.
I know. I will say this, that I would get the ridiculously loud checkered pants, golf pants, and I'd much rather buy the clothes for golfing than I would go to like Bass Pro Shop and just get a bunch of camouflage fucking Carhartt shit. Like if I could now somehow I could combine the two and like duck hunt and golf pants, like then I think I would be at my happiest. But I, I
You,
ain't I ain't trying to go that route now.
you can do what you want to do, Pato. I
I
believe in
t-
you.
Hey man,
Yes.
Alice Cooper plays golf and he wears the loud checkered pants when he does. So,
He's got
See?
his, yeah, Death
he
Sticks.
could
That
do
isn't
it.
that his like golf club line or something? Like
He may have. Yeah, he's been into that because I've got a kind of a mutual friend. Um, and he showed me some pictures like way back, So, Alice Cooper's been into golf like forever.
yeah.
You got to have something that you separate from work. That's just for you. And for Alice Cooper, that's golf, I guess. Um, that's what it
Exactly.
is,
Exactly.
So you got to have that thing. Lyle, what do you think about the woo?
Well, I try not to be judgmental or say that I'm right in my opinions or theories. So,
Sure.
I generally will entertain to a certain extent. But to me, some of that is, I feel like, an underestimation of just natural nature itself, because this whole, it disappears and it blends and it pops out of
Hmm.
portals. Like, dude, go hunting. Uh, we're talking about hunting. There are animals can do amazing things. I mean, you will see bears and you will see things like that, but you can walk right past a deer and something and never even see it. And the colors and the shading and the hair and everything else that makes up an animal or creature in the woods is by design. It's not just to make them look a certain way.
Hmm.
Tigers don't just have stripes because it's cool looking in a zoo. They're
Sure.
meant for a purpose to obscure them. And all the times I've been hunting, I've never walked up and seen a cougar or saw a cougar. But I'm definitely in areas where they are, seen a few tracks, but I didn't see one. And if I did, I probably didn't even notice it because it
Hmm.
blends in. So I think wherein we may have a creature such as Bigfoot, who is the ultimate apex predator, the ultimate expert in survival and evasion. It can do some darn amazing things that seem otherworldly, but that could be natural. Um, they could have things of infrasound, and they could have all these other things. I
Sure.
mean, look at the amazing octopus and other creatures we have that are Earth creatures. So I think before we leap too far without proof, sometimes we have to kind of keep it grounded and say, what are the possibilities that this is just an amazing creature that we don't quite understand, but we don't have to necessarily, you know, go go the distance with the really wild stuff. But hey, if people want to theorize that, it's totally cool, I guess.
Sure. I understand. What do you think about what's your take on this dogman phenomenon? Bigfoot, we could kind of have an evolutionary track of maybe where these things came from, right? There's something there scientifically that says, yeah, this thing evolved. There's really not anything like that for dogmen, and a lot of the encounters people have are, for one, they're terrifying. And for two, they seem supernatural in a way. I mean, do you lean one way or the other on it?
I'm not sure what to decide yet about that, and I've been learning more about it. In fact, I just attended a Dogman conference in Tennessee
Yeah.
where I was able to listen to some really, really good presentations and some good witnesses firsthand to kind of get a better idea about about this. Of course, I've read Linda Godfrey's books and read
Sure.
accounts of this. Um, but yeah, it doesn't have it doesn't make biological sense. So if these creatures exist, then you would think that it's hard to explain in natural, you know, in natural order. So, um, I don't know. But one problem I have with this is how trendy the Dogman thing has become. It's like
Yeah.
for years, I didn't get any Dogman reports. I knew about some cases, or Linda was getting some Beast of Bray Road, and then it just sort of like snowballed into every time I turn around, somebody's got, oh, a Dogman sighting, and here's another one, and here's like, man,
Sure.
have the dogs breeded? The Dogman's breed gone crazy here because
They had a baby boom.
yeah, it just almost seems like a trend, which
Sure.
muddies the water because then you can't tell if it's, I don't know. But what I'll say is coming away from a conference where I listened and I learned some stuff, I do feel like that there are legitimate witnesses who have seen something that we can equate with a werewolf looking thing that we just simply cannot explain right now.
Do you think that it could be related to something more so related to like the Gugwe that has that weird dog like snout? And it could be what people are saying is more of a Sasquatch instead of a canine.
Well, that's something I've thought about, and I had a witness that reported seeing what she thought was a Sasquatch, but said it had an elongated snout.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, well, that kind of sounds Dogman, but she wasn't familiar with Dogman, so she wasn't
Sure.
describing it as such. And I thought, well, maybe at the distance it could have had something in its mouth to give it that illusion, um, but I know that when you try to tell a Dogman witness that, oh, it was just you just saw a Sasquatch, and it was,
Right.
they 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 don't buy that, and
Yeah.
I think we have to give them that respect that they would know the difference or feel like they do, and if they say they saw a snout and it looked more arcaded, well, I guess it did, and
Sure.
therein just lies the mystery.
I mean, that one's an easy, kind of an easier one, but you have experience with something that's kind of not an easier one. I mean, what is the deal with this lizard man situation? What I mean, ultimately, what's your opinion on something like that? Because that's really, I mean, that's way away from dog and ape being confused. That's just a totally different ball game.
Right. Yeah. That's even more of a stretch. I mean, biologically, and you know, just sort of trying to answer what is it. In my opinion, it's again, I feel that I wrote a book called Lizard Man, which kind of centers around the infamous Bishopville sightings
Hmm.
in the late '80s, in which people described seeing what they called, a brownish or greenish, scaly humanoid creature they called the Lizard Man. And I feel like that some of those witnesses saw something that was unexplainable. And I also sort of applied that, well, maybe they saw a Sasquatch that was wet or, was covered in algae or
Yeah.
hadn't even mange where it's lost its hair. And, maybe that kind of made it look reptilian. So I was trying to rationalize it, I guess, as opposed to, this whole reptilian concept that there's a race of underground humanoids that lives in caves and they're reptilian or there's extraterrestrials, and but all those are possibilities too. It just boils down to me that people saw something unexplained, and to me was sort of creature from the Black Lagoon type,
Right.
which is like fascinates me, and it's swampy and spooky, but at the end of the day I just don't really have a good solid explanation other than, man, there's some weird stuff and people see weird stuff that we just
Sure.
can't explain.
What do you think about aliens?
I mean, I certainly think that we're probably not the only living beings in the universe, and certainly there could be something out there that is more technologically advanced, and it could very well visit our planet. Um, you know, there's certainly no question that people have seen unidentified flying objects in the sky, but
Sure.
therein the question is, are those, you know, do they contain extraterrestrial beings? Are they just
Right.
something else? But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly open-minded about the alien thing, just like anything else that
Sure.
falls under the paranormal, I guess. And I think it's, it's one of those things that maybe any day now, any minute now, something's going to happen where we go, holy crap, here's the freaking answer right here.
Yeah. I think that would be super exciting. Well, because I'm sure you get people that ask you questions that aren't about cryptozoology a lot. And there is kind of clearly there's a layover between some of these things. Some people call things a cryptid when they don't really fit that demographic. Mothman is a great example of that. It's not really an unidentified animal, but it was a being that people saw. And I'm of the opinion that it's not naturally occurring here. There's not a Mothman nest out there where there's a breeding ground and things like that. Um, what do you think about like the layover of the two? Do you think it's something that we're just going to continue to have to deal with in this community?
Yeah, I think some of these sort of straddle the line. Certainly Mothman, it can be looked at sort of as a cryptid, but it falls far more into the strange category of
Sure.
some sort of being that we don't understand, whether it's earthly or unearthly, or some phenomenon that defies just simply saying, well, it's, yeah, there's a nest and they're flying around.
Right.
That just doesn't apply there. And the same thing kind of with lizard man and other things. It's like, well, there could be, a small population of these creatures, but then again, the sightings are rare and few and far between, and it just seems so more out there that there almost has to be some other explanation if they do indeed exist, and this is what people have seen. For
Sure.
me, I try not to get too bogged down in that because I really can't answer those questions.
Right.
All I can do is document the cases and interview the people. In the case of the lizard man, I interviewed the retired sheriff that was involved, very heavily involved in that case, and was able to document all of that before he passed away. Well, he passed away only a few years after I wrote the book, and I spent a week down there hanging out with him. So I feel a lot of times I'm just documenting this and presenting, here's the facts, here's the various theories,
Hmm.
you know, leave it up
Sure.
to everyone to make their own interpretation or decide until we, have something more concrete, I guess, to evaluate.
Okay. Now, and you just announced this Texas Bigfoot book a couple of days ago. You want to talk more about that for a minute?
Yes. So yeah, Texas Bigfoot, that's my new book. And, it's kind of been a long time coming because as, a lifelong Texan and having researched Bigfoot here and actually having written a book about a famous Bigfoot in Arkansas, I felt, hey, there really needs to be a Texas Bigfoot book. And, there's so many sightings in Texas and people probably don't realize, but it ranks way up there in the number of reports. And there's just been some amazing stuff. And people also probably don't realize, you think Texas, it's like, oh, ranches and wide open country. But as you go east, it is very heavily wooded. It's called the Piney Woods. And there's swampy areas in Texas. There's plenty of environment where these creatures could inhabit just as well as any other parts of the U.S. or in the South, certainly.
Sure. Sure.
And it's another one where I've been collecting stuff or noting stuff or, classic cases, legends, and then modern sightings for the last, 12 or more years. And finally, that's just something where I was like, okay, I've got what I want, and I think it's time. And I just sat down and the actual writing of this book was faster, just simply because I had done the research over a long period of time. So I'm excited about this, and I don't think it applies. I mean, yes, it's specific to a case, but I think in some ways the Texas Bigfoot is something that there's so many really cool and amazing and wild stories of various, classic newspaper articles and supposed Bigfoot bodies and research and exploration all over the state, that it's something that anyone who is into Bigfoot will enjoy.
Yeah. Well, can you give us a taste of maybe what's in there? Maybe recount a case that people will find in the book, or
Yeah, just I start off with one that occurred back in the 1960s, and it was in the northeast part of Texas, just south of the Red River. And the Red River separates Texas from Oklahoma, and there's a long history of sightings up in there. But back in the 1960s, the notion that Bigfoot was in Texas was just no one, was thinking about that. And I interviewed a guy who was an avid hunter, and he hunted in that area for several years, and he had been hunting out there, and he had been finding some arrowheads in the creeks. And so uh, one evening, he kind of just like, what am I going to hunt? I'm just going to walk in these creeks, look for more arrowheads. And so that's what he was doing. And it was just starting to get dark, and he was, walking in this creek, looking down, and he got this feeling that he was being watched. And so, he looked up, and, maybe 50 yards away, less, he sees this hulking, hairy looking figure just looking right at him. And as he focused on it, he's not thinking Bigfoot. And it didn't really look like an ape. He described it to me in terms of it seemed like it was something very ancient. It was something,
hmm,
completely unlike anything he'd ever seen, obviously. And as the thing just stood there looking at him, and it obviously looked powerful and big and was standing upright on two legs, and he knew it wasn't a human. This guy just, he got the chills, and then he got the fear, and then he just said he just took off running for his truck, and headed out of those woods, kind of occasionally looking back to see if this thing had followed him, which fortunately it did not.
hmm,
But this is one where it sort of was an unexpected encounter in a state that's certainly not known for these things. And as the years would progress, you know, the stories like this would start being documented and occasionally made it in newspapers and eventually to the internet. And then, really, kind of not far from there, the legend of Boggy Creek, kind of made the southern Sasquatch famous in the early 70s. So
sure.
I felt like it's a cool sighting, and it sort of just sort of is a perfect way to start the book, where somebody encounters something, ancient and strange. And so there's many more like that in the book, obviously.
Great. And it's not out yet, is it?
No, it's almost. I've got the proof here that I'm approving, and the release date is October, but I think it may be released a little bit early. So
Sure.
hopefully I can get that going. The big Texas Bigfoot conference that happens every year in October, so I'm definitely was trying to have it ready by then. But I should have it. It may be online here in mid-September.
Ooh, that would be nice. That would be nice. We're
Yeah,
gonna have to definitely. Well, and if you guys, just are chomping at the bit to buy something from Lyle, he's got tons of other things you can absolutely buy from him. So, it's,
that's right. I want to catch up on the rest of the reading material before buying the new one. But yes, certainly there's a
um,
little bit of everything.
sure. Pat O, did you have any questions about anything that that I've asked, or any of your own questions for that
I,
matter?
I'm ordering the Lizard Man book now because I never heard that story before, and I
Oh,
love the fact that it takes place in the late '80s.
it's okay.
You know what I mean? Just
Yeah,
because it's like modern era. I don't know.
It's total
Like,
Stranger Things. I mean, like
Yeah.
they set that in the '80s. I'm like, dude, this really happened. Like, there's no Demogorgon, but dude, there was a creature from the Black Lagoon in the late '80s in South Carolina. This is true.
yeah, no, that's awesome. I can't wait to read that story.
Yeah, Will
Um,
Byers gets abducted by it and everything. It's that doesn't happen, but it's a good book. Read it. Anyway, go ahead, Pat.
no, that's all I got. Uh, I got another. Well, I got more band questions, I guess. Like, who's do you have any like open for anyone cool or you know, meet anyone on the road or I don't know.
Oh yeah, certainly. My my top favorite band is the Misfits, and we opened for the reformed Misfits. We did some shows with them. We were playing in a club once, where it was upstairs, downstairs, and they were playing the big stage upstairs that night. We were playing the smaller room, and I was singing, and we were playing the cover of Ghost Riders in the Sky, which we do in Ghoultown, and some people are pointing and looking over, and I look over, and the bass player of the Misfits, Jerry Only, is up on stage singing backing vocals with me, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? That was super cool, and we became friends after that, and I've been a Misfits fan since early '80s, and let's see, my second favorite band is Merciful Fate. The singer King Diamond. We did a U.S. tour with Merciful Fate back in the '90s, which was awesome because I could watch them every night. Um, we did the first major tour I did was with Paul Di'Anno's band called Killers. Paul Di'Anno was the original singer for Iron Maiden, and so that was cool. I just got to hang out with that guy and quiz him on about 500. He probably annoyed the hell out of him with all these Iron Maiden history questions I kept asking, but you know, you're like in a topless bar or something. I'm like, so anyway, dude, when you guys recorded the first thing, he's like, I'm trying to tip this girl. He was super cool, but yeah, I mean, just always just cool stuff like that. Meeting, your heroes and playing on stages around. It was all very cool.
I used to Jeff Bizzotti from Naked Ray Gun. He had a record label here in Chicago, and I worked at it for about a year. And him and I would go out to lunch periodically, and I would just be like, ask him, what was Steve Albini like? Or on this album, I would just sit there and like throw questions at him the whole fucking time,
Yeah,
and everything that like as a fan, like listening to like the people's records and like the lyrics and all this stuff, you just amass like all these questions in your head, and then you're put in the position where you kind of have enough of a friendship, and I mean, they know you're a fan. You try not to be a dick about it, but you know, you would just sit there and ask them just everything that why did you write this song about? They have a song about like Dark Knight Returns, and what other Frank Miller comics have you read? And you were in Big Black with Steve Albini and you played bass. What was that like? What was Steve Albini like? Blah 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 blah. And who cares if it gets annoying? I mean, it's like that's not why you do it, but when you're put in that position, it's really hard not to. Going to the Danzig thing, I know we've actually the Misfits have come up like with the past couple guests actually, and I am a huge Misfits fan as well. They were kind of I was like I grew up listening to Guns N' Roses and Metallica. Well, I grew up listening to the oldie station with my parents, and the Misfits kind of act as that nice bridge between punk rock and the oldies, because they are so like melodic and stuff. But I was a big Metallica fan, and I got gotten the Binge and Purge box set, and they have a cover of Last Caress on there, and I remember going to school and being like, "Oh, Last Caress!" Like I just heard this awesome Metallica song I never heard before, and someone like pulled me aside and was like, "No, dude, that's the Misfits," and totally blew my head open. And they were probably the most consistent musical influence of mine throughout my entire life. We had a cover band called Children in Heat, Misfits cover band for a while,
cool. Yeah.
and I mean, just you can play all their songs. It's fun to try to sing like dancing. Um, I actually had a chance to finally like pay him back a little. I was writing for Daily Grindhouse, and they premiered Veronica, the Danzig movie, here in Chicago. And I just went to it. I didn't get like press passes or anything. It was part of Cinepocalypse, or I don't know, some festival. And Danzig was there to release it. It was one of the only like theatrical screenings that he did. And he screened it. And I don't know, have you seen it yet, Veronica?
I attempted to watch it.
Yeah. So I sat through the whole thing because I was in the theater with Mr. Danzig himself, and obviously it is what it is. But I dug it, and it felt very uncompromisingly Danzig, and it made me happy that he got to make something that literally feels like somebody plugged a cord into his brain and then turned that into a movie. Um, and when I wrote the review of it for Daily Grindhouse, like I was very complimentary towards it. And a lot of people came out of that movie and just shit all over it. And like, oh, this is the horror movie version of The Room, and this is whatever, and it's so bad it's good, and all that normal shit. And I said, no. Like, Veronica is the best horror movie I've seen in the theater all year. Now, granted, this was like in March, right? So there was only 3 months into the year. But I said that in the review, and they put it in the trailer and on the back of the DVD. So I was glad that I got to do that for him. You know what I mean? I know he didn't get a lot of positive reviews, but that was one of them, and I'm glad that they used it in their marketing material. And when his next movie came out, the vampire Rider in the Death House, or whatever the fuck it was called, I had emailed the production company and tried to get press passes or a set visit or something like that, and never happened. I don't know if it was because it was during the COVID thing,
It's
but
because they knew you were a liar.
no, I'm a pro dancing liar. Like I'll sit up there and say that this is fucking Gone with the Wind with vampire movies or some shit. I would have come up with something clever for them to put on that poster. Like,
This guy
I could,
lies. We're not gonna.
no, this guy really likes Danzig. Like this guy, like is still a fifth because Danzig's still like a 15-year-old in heart. Like he's still into monster movies and chicks with big fake tits and blood. Like you watch
Aren't we all
Veronica.
though?
That's believe it or not, Ashers. No, we are part of a very select community of people that have refused to grow up and still are goofy little teenagers at heart.
That's what I was saying. Aren't we all?
Yeah, no, it's not all of us. It's all of us, but it's not all of like everybody.
I gotcha. Okay.
But Danzig is definitely the king of that, I feel. You know.
Sure.
And yeah, I dig New Misfits. That's cool.
Yeah, I never, I liked them. I didn't like obviously as much as the Danzig era, and I didn't see the original Misfits. I remember when they played Dallas. I could. It was like on a school night, and I couldn't drive and I couldn't get out. But I remember my friends went. There was like 20 people there. But I did see Sam Hain in
Yeah.
'84 and got to talk to Glenn for like 30 minutes before the show because I showed up early and I just sat there and he and I talked for like 30 minutes, which was cool. I mean, I was a little kid.
And he was cool with you because he's kind of got that rep where sometimes he can be a jag off, but
Yeah, and he was super cool.
Yeah, I would think he'd be cool.
My ex-wife dated him shortly after me, so
Whoa! That is insane. I mean, you can't even get angry about that. I mean, I guess there's only one way to follow up Lyle Blackburn, and that's fucking Glenn Danzig. Like, dude, that's pretty fucking awesome.
right.
Well, maybe it wasn't.
That's
Maybe it wasn't. I'm sorry.
Nah, it was. I don't care. It was kind of funny, really, but yeah, it was kind of random. That's totally true.
Man,
Lyle
chicks will do that though.
Blackburn.
Chicks will track down your fucking boyhood idol, and
Right.
you know what I mean. Like that's such a. I'm sorry, I don't know any of these people, but I'm just saying, like that's such a. I have exes that would do that for sure.
I mean, that's true. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. You know.
Well, before I forget, I've been dying to ask this question. Will you tell the story about the Mothman rave, please?
The Mothman raid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like the first. That's the first time I went to the Mothman Festival, and I was like, okay, cool, and I was familiar with the Mothman story, but I haven't been to Point Pleasant yet, and here's the festival, and I've been to Bigfoot conferences and stuff, so which are more subdued and more, academic, I guess, in a way. And so I get to the Mothman, and it's more of a street party, really, and so I didn't know what to expect, and the night before the actual street festival, so this is Friday night, they're having some kind of like a thing at the State Theater, a Mothman rave, which I'm like, what is that? Like, I mean, I've been to a lot of weird stuff in my life, and then I don't know if there was like a Miss Mothman contest or something, but there was. I just remember girls dressed up as moth ladies and such, and then in the State Theater where there's incidentally no air conditioning,
Yeah.
which adds to just the whole just I don't know atmosphere. And yeah, then suddenly I remember I was with Erie Eric, the artist, and
Yeah.
yeah, they just totally plunged into the lights and the whole thing, and Mothman Brave, and it was so surreal. It was almost like that movie Veronica was like uh, the Danzig movie or something. It was just so unexpectedly bizarre to be at a Mothman rave. But that's when I realized Mothman is of a different caliber, of another level of creature, cryptid entity, and its festival is also very bizarre and strange and unexplainable, just like this
Yeah.
rave that I'm sitting in this hot, humid theater in a small town in Ohio. I mean, in West Virginia on the edge of the Ohio River. So, yeah, it was memorable, and that kicked off my whole, uh, guest appearance at the Mothman Festival, which I've been to several since. And I'm
I'm
looking
very
forward to
sad.
this year.
Yeah, I'll be there. So I'll meet you there finally. It was just bound to happen. We're gonna cross paths one of these days, so I'll definitely be there. But I'm sad that there's not gonna be a Mothman rave.
Well, there's enough time to plan your own.
That's
Yeah,
true. Just
you should, because I think that's just something that's lacking. And once you have a Mothman rave, you got to continue that. That's got to be every year.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I was so disappointed to hear that this was a thing that I was not a part of. I was like, they also said that because it was Eric and Carrie that were telling me that story. They also said Craig Woolheater was there with you guys.
Yes, Craig was up there. I believe that was the year Craig was there. So yeah, Craig is my cohort, and just we have such a big sense of humor about all this stuff, and it's just everything is just
Sure.
fun. So yeah, that anytime there's something that goes off the rails like that gives us comedic fodder for years. Mothman rave, and it was some fun times.
I love that. I just wanted people to know that there was a Mothman rave at some point. That was really it, and that there was somebody that witnessed it and partook. So
Yes, it is true. I was there. It is a true story.
I appreciate that. Pato, did you have more music questions?
I'm not even gonna try to follow that up. That's good. That's
The
icing on the
Mothman rave.
cake. Yeah.
We might curate a rave. We got time. You're right. We still got. We have.
We could do a Frogman rave.
We could do a Frogman rave. We might do a Frogman rave.
Yes, and you're close enough to location scout abandoned warehouses,
Yeah,
and I will most certainly DJ.
we'll have it right
Well,
there.
one of the
One of those,
DJs.
I'm sure one of those places right there where the sighting took place is abandoned. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll just have it right there in the street, right there at that park.
Show up again.
Yeah, in front of everybody. Um, okay. Well, Lyle, where can everybody find you at? What's good contact for you, or a good place to buy your things?
Well, you can find out all about me at lyleblackburn.com. And my books are available on Amazon. And if you would like to see some of the Small Town Monsters movies that I'm associated with, those are available on Amazon Prime. You can search Lyle Blackburn, and those will come up. Um, And I have an online store if you would like autographed copies of books and such, and Boggy Creek exclusive merch. The link is on my webpage at lyleblackburn.com. And of course, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and everywhere else that's necessary these days. So, yeah, look me up, follow me. And if you're at the Mothman Festival coming up or other festivals, I look forward to meeting people in person. Just come up to my table and we can talk cryptids and music and anything else.
And check out Lyle's podcast, Monstro Bizarro. That's been a new. We didn't even talk about that at all during this whole.
Oh, but, that's right. I've got a podcast. I forget. I haven't been plugging that because I haven't done many interviews lately. But yes, Monstro Bizarro. It's a monthly podcast. So yeah, check that out. And all that info is on my website as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Lyle. This was awesome. It was a long time coming. So, and then I'll see you at the Mothman Festival. But everybody else, I'll see you guys back here next Wednesday.